I am Bender. Please insert girder.
A few weeks before the Wii's release, people were hyped. Discussions sparked all over websites talking about Nintendo's new and upcoming console. And just like every other game console about to be released in stores, leaks started to surface. A few photos of Wii boxes started surfacing over the internet, with some mentioning this Startup Disc. The Evermore forums actually had a discussion where people tried to speculate about what this Startup Disc even was. But in November, after a month, when people actually got their Wii, this Startup Disc was nowhere to be found. The only disc the console came with was Wii Sports, so what the hell was that? We all know by now that the Wii was a smash hit. It was almost impossible to get one for the entirety of 2006 fall. People wanted a Wii, and they wanted one really bad. Nintendo hyped the console so much that people had to camp outside of stores to get one. The console was going to be launched in North America first on November the 19th, 2006. And kiosks were already available by the beginning of the month to let people enjoy the Wii experience. Oh man, I feel old. I remember the articles about people smashing TVs with Wii remotes. But anyway, some kiosks were broken and they only displayed an error message asking for this Startup Disc. The launch went pretty smoothly and this whole Startup Disc thing was pretty quickly forgotten. Wii didn't ship with a Startup Disc at all, the only disc they had in the box was Wii Sports. So not a lot of people cared about this weird thing. But a series of events was about to happen that would forever open Pandora's box. An auction appeared on eBay selling a broken Wii, asking for the Startup Disc. If you went on Nintendo's website and searched for what to do with a Wii that displayed this error, they will just tell you to send it to them and get it fixed. But, well, what the hell is a Startup Disc to begin with? A user named Paul on Assembler Games wondered the same, so he bought the broken Wii and sent it to Bushing. Bushing is a legendary hacking figure. He was a member of Fail Overflow, the team that originally hacked the Wii. Modern Vintage Gamer made a detailed video about this, and it involves a pair of tweezers, so you know it's great. Paul sent the Wii to Bushing, which had been after one for years. This mysterious broken Wii could finally uncover how Nintendo flashed Wiis during manufacturing, which could in turn help fix broken Wiis. From the serial number, the console appeared to be from 2008. This didn't really make sense. According to all the info available online, the Startup Disc Wiis had to be launch Wiis. After disassembling it, the drive didn't match to. It was a D2B drive which started production around 2007. Finally, taking a look at the board, this was indeed a launch motherboard. The date code below the SD card slot, which is used to tell when the console was manufactured, read 3306, so the 33rd week of 2006, around August 15. Yup, this was a launch Wii. The outer casing and the drive had been swapped, but the motherboard, where the NAND resides, was a launch one. After turning the console on, Bushing was greeted by the screen, and putting any disk in the console would just lead to this error popping up. But, well, Bushing was a hacker. After talking with the fellow hacker Crediar, he was reminded of a peculiar check the Wii menu does every time you insert a disk. It checks the disk ID, and if it is RAE, it totally refuses to boot it. This gave Bushing an idea. He soldered a mod chip to the Wii, which allowed him to boot any disks he wanted. Then he fake signed a disk with the RAE ID, burned it, and tried booting it. And, well, it worked, but the Wiimotes didn't sync since there was no OS, and without OS you don't really have a working Bluetooth module. He hacked GameCube controller support into the software he was burning, real WND, burned under disk, and finally he was able to dump the NAND, making a copy of this peculiar console's internal memory. You can find a very detailed technical analysis of its content in his original blog post, but basically, the theory is that Nintendo produced the very first bunch of consoles without a finished OS. By around August, they had the hardware ready but not the software, so what they did was programming these early Wiis with a system menu version 0, which is the one you see here, that just prompted the user to put the startup disk in. The startup disk could be mass-produced later and it will just be a disk that installs the system menu. In the end though, the system menu was actually finished in time and most of the launch day consoles were able to have it pre-installed. Except for a few thousand. Nintendo was able to use most of them for kiosks, but a very small amount of them ended up in consumer hands, prompting them to make the aforementioned online support page. So, from this single Wii, we now know what a startup disk is, why some Wiis required it, and what it technically contains, but we don't have access to one. Or do we? The mystery lay dormant for another 10 years, but in 2018 something began to happen. Information began to leak from Nintendo's servers, more precisely the IQ ones. If you don't know what IQ is, you can't really sell normal video games in China because... So Nintendo is a company that's government approved to sell games. They have a Nintendo 64 plug-and-play called the IQ. They even have an IQ DS with 6 games released. Anyway, the IQ servers used to contain a lot of stuff from the Nintendo servers, including source codes, development repositories, tech demos, debug materials, prototypes, concepts, official emulators, unreleased games, and even Wii Startup Discs. On September 2nd, 2020, during the third part of this Giga leak, a small series of data was published on 4chan. There was some information about 2 GameCube models that never came out, including one that would natively render games in HD. Super interesting stuff, but what we are interested in today are the startup discs, and 2 of them were leaked between this leak and another leak that would happen a week later. We'll be focusing on the main English version, the one that was actually meant to go with these Wiis that were out in the wild asking for the girder, but I have to mention that a Chinese startup disc was leaked with a half-finished Chinese translation of the Wii system menu, which is interesting since there was no IQ Wii released, but it seems that one was indeed in the works. But yeah, let's take a look at the actual English startup disc, the American startup disc, which was actually the one that should have been put in the boxes, but ultimately wasn't. So this disc actually has the right ID, and that confirms why the Wii menu checks for the ID of a disc. And it is, in fact, as suspected, an installer for the very first Wii menu version, 1.0. This version was very early and only a handful of launch Wiis had it installed. Most of them actually came with version 2.0 pre-installed, and upgrading from 1.0 was necessary to play games or use any of the online features, so basically no one used this. It had some peculiar features like no slopes on the menu, which you can't unsee once you notice them. Early disc channel graphics, no Wii Shop, news or forecast channels since they were all unfinished, you couldn't even move channels, and there was no system menu version shown in the settings. Thanks to this startup disc, we now have access to what is, effectively, the first officially released Wii system menu version, that lasted less than a day and that most people didn't see at all. In the Giga leak there were a handful of previous Wii menu versions, but they were in fact internal testing beta versions, never meant to be shown to the public. For example, we have a release candidate build from September 24, 2006, about 2 weeks before the final version, which only boots if you press Z on a GameCube controller plugged in port 4. I could probably had once in a full moon and it wouldn't even sound weird. But yeah, these early versions were clearly meant for debugging purposes or development. The actual first version that was shipped to consumers, even though only a few of them actually got to see it, was 1.0U. And this is where the saga of this startup disc ends. Nintendo's silence about this whole thing basically turned what would be a glorified install disc into an alternate reality game, which was ironically solved by a very talented hacker getting one of these elusive consoles and digging through its NAND, and a leaker getting into their servers. So yeah, I've wanted to make this video for a while now. You now know what a Wii Startup Disc is, and for me it's been pretty wild following this whole thing from Bushing's post back in 2010, And I'm actually making this video as a tribute to Bushing, since he unfortunately passed away back in 2016 due to natural causes. I wanted to make this video as a sort of conclusion to this whole story. And I'm really attached to Bushing and the whole tweezers/fail overflow team. I used to go to the Acme blog as a kid and read stuff there when I was getting into this hacking world. So yeah, this is just my kind of tribute, my kind of video in memory of Bushing and his work. And I don't feel like closing this video with a joke like I usually do. So yeah, thank you for sticking around. Thank you, Bushing, and thank you to the tweezers/fail overflow team for their awesome work. And yeah, good night.